Welcome to lesson 2 of our New Testament Greek classes. Just before we do a little recall on lesson 1, just a word or two about the aim and direction of this course. What we're doing is it's like we're looking for gold. But the whole area that we're searching in is covered in bush and forest. So in order to find the gold, we have to cut a trail in and get the gold and then bring it back out. Now, what I'm doing in this course is I'm making the trail only as wide as it needs to be. So for example, I'm not saying that you have to learn all the Greek alphabet, because that's not necessary to cut the trail for this particular aim of each lesson. Nor am I saying you have to learn tables or endings or technical grammatical terminology, because that's not necessary. So all we did in lesson 1 was we cut a trail just wide enough to get to the aim that we had, to reach our deposit of gold and to extract it. And in this lesson, which is lesson 2, we're going to partly go over that same trail to revise some of the things we learned, and we're going to cut a few new bits, and then we'll mine another bit of gold that's close to the piece of gold that we extracted in lesson 1, but there are a few differences. So it's like we're cutting a new trail that partly goes over the old trail. And again, it'll be just wide enough to extract the gold that we're looking for. And some of the things that we learn will give us extra insights into what we found in lesson 1. So here are the Greek words that we learnt in lesson 1. And my advice to you is to learn these words. Just learn it as Greek and say it to yourself many times so that you just say the Greek. You don't need to think of English at all. If you say it enough times, just let the Greek soak into your mind as pure Greek. You don't need to associate it with English. And if you do it enough times, not even with a little shadow of English translation, just pure Greek. And then that way you'll be really getting into the pure gold. Now, just a comment here. In some courses, they give you a vocab list like this. So they say, go and learn this vocab. Here is the vocab from lesson 1. Go and learn it. Well, if you like to do that sort of thing, okay, that's fine, you can do that. But my suggestion in this course is we don't learn a vocab list. And I have a few reasons for saying that. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, in several places I will say pause and think. So that's your chance, if you want to pause the tape and think about what I've said, or try to think of an answer to the question that I give. So my question is now, why do you think I'm saying don't learn a vocab list? Pause. Okay, and so my answer is because I want you to learn the pure Greek, and because every English rendering is really only an approximation. We could call it a first approximation or a working approximation, or even sometimes we could call it a rough guide. So, rough guide, but it's not exactly the same as English the. So you recall in lesson 1, the Greek word started with but in our final translation, we didn't translate it at all, it dropped out. So that's why I say that is the, not as an exact equivalent, but as a first approximation or a rough guide. And the same would go for these other words. Agape, love, but sometimes in the Greek New Testament it can be translated by other words, for example, concern. So again, love is a first approximation, a rough guide. Okay, a good guide, but you see, that's the other thing with these lists. When people learn a list like this, they think that this is the exact meaning, and when you deviate from that meaning and use another word, they think you're starting to go astray or getting into free translation, not you're leaving literal translation and not translating as carefully and as exactly and as accurately as you should. But in fact, departing from these is not necessarily inexact translation, but it may be necessary to depart from those when in a certain context to make a good translation for that context. And then another point is some courses, like the one that I did many years ago when I first learned Greek, they would, as soon as they give you estin, they give you all the other parts of it. The way to say is, am, are, was, were, and you have to learn a table of all those different forms. So again, if you like doing that sort of thing, well then you can do that. But this course is designed to learn just what you need to know so that we can get to the gold as quickly as possible. And then when we need to learn another part of it to get to another piece of gold, then we'll learn it. That's the way that this course is structured. Okay, so now we'll look at the worksheet for this week's lesson. Okay, so this is the words, the small passage for our lesson 2 today. And this also comes from 1 John chapter 4, verse 7b, the second part of verse 7. And again, you can find this passage and the text of this lesson on my blog. I'll give you the address again later. Or some people have got it off the internet. Someone told me they got it off Bible Gateway or another Bible program to get these words from 1 John chapter 4 verse 7b, the second part of verse 7. So firstly, let's do our folding exercise again. We turn the paper over, blank side up. Now we fold it in half lengthwise like that. Then we open it out, still blank side up, open it out and fold the top into the center fold and the other end into the center fold as well, like that. So that now when we open it out, we have the 3 areas to write our notes. Okay, so the first letter, this is a letter that we met in our first lesson. So if you can remember what it is, you can pause and write it in, or if you like, you can pause and write in all the letters as I do them one by one. Yes, this first letter is an E, and it's the long E, so we write this line above it, and then it has the apostrophe curving inwards, which means bring in an H. So we bring in an H. The second word is the same as we had in the first lesson. So if you want to pause and try and recall and write it or look it up, pause for a minute and then I'll come back to it. Yeah, it's agape. Or if we're going to put the stress where this mark is, we'd say agape. Next word is again a new word like the first word was. And the first letter of that is pause. Yes, an E. The second letter is a new letter, but again it looks like a letter that we know from English. So if you want to pause, yes, it's okay. The next word is again a new word, but it starts with a letter that we know, which is T. Another letter that we know, pause if you like, is O. Then finally a new letter. A new letter, but again it looks like the corresponding English letter. It's a U. Okay, the next word begins with this letter which we met, pause. Yes, it's a TH. So notice in English we use the two letters, but Greek has only one letter and it is really only one sound. Next letter we've met is an E, next letter O, and next letter is the same as this letter here, it's a U. Now the last word is the same word as we had in lesson 1. So if you want to pause, yes, it's estin. So remember the apostrophe going that way said don't bring in an H with this word and with this word, and the word is estin. So this reads he agape ek tu theu estin. That's our letter by letter translation. So next on our sheet is our word by word translation. Now there are 5 words here, and of these 5 there are actually 4 that we already know. We have each of the 4 words from our last lesson, but 3 of the 4 have changed shape, 2 have changed their endings, and 1 has changed out of recognition. And the one that's changed out of recognition, unfortunately, is this first word. And the first word is another form of the Greek word the. You recall in lesson 1 we had ho, which meant the, but here is another form of the same word. It really is just the same word, but it's changed its form completely. It didn't actually have to change, but I think this is the kind of trick that languages do on people, just so that they can have a bit of fun at the expense of learners. They put in unnecessary complexity just to trip up the learners, and then they can have a good laugh. Okay, fair enough. Let's let them have their fun. But this is the word the, a different form of the word the. Second word is agape, which we met before. So again, pause. Yes, it's love. The next word is the new word. This is the only brand new word here. And the word is ek. And it means out from, out or out from. And we have words like this that have been borrowed into English, like exit, exhale, exclude, export. So sometimes it's spelled EX and sometimes it's spelled EK, and it means out from, as in exhale or exit, go out. So we'll translate it here as from, out from or from. Now the next word is tu, and again this is another form of the word the. Again, it's completely different in shape, in letters, but again it's just another form of the word the. And the second last word is again God, but as you can see it has changed its ending, but it's just God. And the last word, which you might remember from our last lesson, pause, is. Now, just a word about the change in ending here. So, hotheos, as we had in lesson 1, has changed its ending. Theos in lesson 1 became theu here. But we do the same thing in English. We don't say from he, but we say from him. You see, we put an M ending on it. We don't say from they, but we say from them. So there is an M ending that we use in English when it comes after certain words like from. So English actually does the same thing as in Greek. But Greek does it with many more words. English only does it with a few. Actually, we're lucky we owe this actually to the Vikings. You might be surprised to hear that, but we owe this to the Vikings because the Vikings, when they arrived in England, they made sport of knocking the heads off the Anglos, and when they'd got tired of that game, they started knocking the ends off their words. So that's why in English, most words don't change their endings. For example, God or love in English never change their ending, but in Greek they do change their endings, and it makes really just a trap for new players. But you can see why with these two little words that escaped the Vikings and remained with their changed endings, from him and from them. And the same as we say from me, we don't say from I. And the word for the changed to match. So in Greek the word the always matches the word that it goes with. That's why this first the changed, because it matches the word that it goes with, agape. So what we have here, word for word then, is the love from the God is. So our last step is to do a free translation or a proper translation. So you can pause. And yes, we'll translate it as love is from God. Or you may have that slightly different. Now, an important thing to notice here is that in our first lesson, the word agape had no the going with it. It just stood by itself. But here, the word the goes with it. And that makes a subtle difference in Greek. It works in a similar way in English, except not for this word, because in English we always just say love. Well, occasionally we say the love, like we might say the love of a man for his wife, or the love of a woman for her husband. So we can put the, but it's used a little bit differently to how it's used in Greek. But the difference that it's making here between no the in our phrase in lesson 1 and the here can be illustrated perhaps with a different English word like top. So I might say this is the top, or this is top. With the article it denotes the thing, this is the top, but without the article it denotes a quality. This is top means like top quality, whereas if I say this is the top, it means like the top of the mountain. It's a little bit like saying the time is 3 o'clock or time is money. So the difference between the time and time is a little bit the same as the difference between the top and top. The top is specifying a particular thing, but when we say it without the, it's more talking about the quality. So that actually gives us a bit more insight into our lesson 1 phrase. It said, ho theos agape estin, and it's talking about the quality, God's quality. It's not so much identifying God as love, equals love, but it's talking about a quality that God has. So I might say, for example, my car is top, meaning it's very best quality. So here when we say ho theos agape with no the, it's talking about a quality which God has. But here, in this second phrase that we're learning today, agape has the he, the and so that means, yes, it is love that we're talking about. It's the thing that we're talking about, not just a quality that a person may or may not have, but it's talking about the actual thing, love. So that takes us back again to perhaps reconsider the translation of our last week phrase in the light of the difference that we now see it makes, and it perhaps justifies the translations that we came up with to say something like the nature of God is love, or God's quality is love. God's character is love. It's talking about a quality that God has, not so much as a thing that God is equal to. So that's just a little insight back into our lesson 1 from what we've seen in lesson 2. So lesson 2, again, I advise you to fold up your sheet and just look at this. In an hour, just look at it again and try to remember it, and then unfold your sheet as you need to refresh your memory. But I would suggest you just try and learn this. Try and learn it so that it's fixed in your memory as pure Greek, with not even any English associated with it, just so that you know in the deepest part of your brain what these Greek words mean, and at the same time the real meaning of these words can seep into your brain and then down into your heart. Love, the thing that we call love, it comes from God. Love is from God. Can you think of another way to say that? Pause. You could say God is the source of love. God is the source of love. But after you finish saying that, just think again and just put the pure Greek into your brain, and let the pure truth of these words then seep right through your brain and right through your heart and soul. You can find the text of this lesson and the Greek phrases at my blog, which is logosword.wordpress.com.